Okay, good evening, everybody. Wow. Well, welcome all, and welcome everybody in Lauria as well. I understand the overflow space is also filled, Tatiana, so as you know, we love you here. Welcome all to the third Thursday lecture of the spring semester, although it is not remotely spring-like outside. And it is my great pleasure, as I already alluded to introduce truly a member of our School of Architecture family and a dear friend of mine, Tatiana Bilbao, the Charles Gwathmey Professor in Practice here at the School of Architecture. The Gwathmey Professor in Practice position was established in 2009 with a very generous gift from Ralph and Ricky Lauren in honor of the architect Charles Gwathmey, a member of the class of 1962, an occasional faculty member, designer of the Lauria building, among many other buildings, who had died that year. Previous Gwathmey professors in practice have been Peter Eisenman and Todd Williams and Billy Chen, and the position is now held by Sandra Barkley and Jean-Pierre Krauss in the fall semester and Tatiana Bilbao in the spring. Tatiana Bilbao started her studio in 2004 with the aim of explicitly integrating social values, community, and collaboration across many disciplines with architecture. The work of the Mexico City-based office includes research as well, allowing them to design for diverse circumstances and in reconstruction and crisis scenarios. Today, the firm has completed projects internationally, from large-scale master plans and affordable housing complexes to university buildings and small residences. Prior to founding her firm, she was an advisor in the Ministry of Development and Housing of the government of the Federal District of Mexico City, and during this period, she also served on the city's Advisory Council for Urban Development. As mentioned, Tatiana currently holds a recurring teaching position here at Yale. Earlier, in her career, she taught here as the Louis I. Kahn Visiting Assistant Professor and later twice as the Norman Foster Visiting Professor. She's also taught at the GSD, at GSAPP, at Columbia, at Rice University, and at schools in Germany and Chile as well. And her work has been published in the New York Times, A+U, Domus, Arquitectura Viva, and many other publications from around the world. Her work has been consistently recognized over the last decade and a half. The list of awards is very, very long, so I'll mention only a few. In 2010, she was named as an emerging voice by the Architectural League of New York. In 2014, she received the Sustainable Architecture Prize from the Locust Foundation. She is also a recipient of the 2017 Impact Award from Architizer, the 2019 Marcus Prize from the University of Wisconsin, and the 2020 Tau Sigma Delta Gold Medal. In 2021, she was named an honorary fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. In 2022, she was awarded the Richard Neutra Award from Cal Poly Pomona, and last year she received the Miller Prize from the Landmark Columbus Foundation. The work of her office has been exhibited at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark, the Graham Foundation in Chicago, the Venice Architecture Biennale, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, among many other museums, galleries, and architectural biennales that would take you on multiple trips around the world. Tonight she is giving a lecture entitled The People and I, so please join me in giving Tatiana a really warm welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Dean, for this beautiful introduction, but mostly for giving me continuous voice in this community, which I esteem so much. Really has enhanced my journey as a professional, but mostly as a human. And I really thank this community for giving me that. Experience that profoundly has shaped my life in many regards. So thank you again, and thank you for being here. It's an honor for me to share tonight with you. Architecture is a colonizing act by itself. With no other condition, it creates an imposition on a land. Nevertheless, architecture is a colonizing act that allows us humans to inhabit in this planet. I did not learn this at my school, unfortunately. It took a profound act of learning from my own experience, and probably I did not fall into place until I had the life-changing experience of becoming architecture, as Isabel Martinez Abascal describes it very well, for two little human beings that were inhabiting my belly for 9 months each. Of course, not only by myself, with a little help of another human being, my husband. Buenos días. Oigan, vamos a vestirnos primero, ¿no?
Quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera.
Ok, ahorita te
Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera.
¿Te quieres?
Mío.
Hay que coser.
De mi copa. Y a mí también se me cayeron muchos de mi copa. Oye.
¿Cómo te pones? ¿Cómo te pones con él? Through that, I really understood what I always probably subconsciously thought was architecture. It is a thing that provides a primary form of care for our bodies. I grew up in a country where one could say architecture is not only a right, it's a constitutional right. It's housing, but I think of it as architecture. But for me, since I was very little, it made really that holds body to exist and that allows us to be in this planet. It gives shelter, and otherwise we cannot exist over there. Obviously, there's a lot more layers to it and a lot more complexity, but I thought always, since starting my own practice, of understanding what is that core unit and where to place my energy was to think of where we live, the space in we grow, we learn, that we become healthy, that we become grown-ups, and then the place where eventually we create our own little platforms for then continuing life. And since then, I started really working in many regards towards housing and the production of that. I understood the right as a kind of mandate to the work I do. And I really started working in terms of how that looks in the physical realm, how that is an architectural definition, but also how architecture incides in policy, in public policy, in politics, but also how it really, in the life of people, incides profoundly, and what it shapes and what it does. We worked on several paths, understanding what is a house, what is a system of housing, what is what represents the right, and etc. And at some point, we created a model for a program called Vivienda Popular that was able to be built in a base for $8,000, and that would be giving you the possibility by a design strategy of creating multiple layouts in your house. We were giving the opportunity of build 23 of these houses after a very tragic situation. A tornado had blown them in Acuña, in a border city of between Mexico and the U.S., where we were able to test our testament, let's say, of design, of thinking that these houses could be adapted to any context and to any weather. While it did many things, for example, allowing possibilities of usage of the plot of land of each specific family in many multiple ways that they couldn't do before, they also got probably the double amount of space that they had before, not counting what they could expand and that they did expand afterwards inside than they had before, with the same amount of money and many other things. We definitely we're procuring also that the neighborhood would be enhanced by these, and how the house would construct the neighborhood, that it was kind of broken, it was all spread out, and it needed really some roots to become much more of a neighborhood. So thinking on that and acting in this place, allow us to prove many of the things, but also allow us to understand that many of the ideal actions we wanted to provide with this type of architecture obviously were not the universal solution for housing or for a house or for anything in any regard. So we were really kind of still looking into places where we could act and understand and create more possibilities for opening paths to, again, not looking at a right that also the UN has called as a human right, after the Mexican Constitution called it a right. We had the opportunity to be invited to work in Lyon, France, the land of liberté, égalité, and fraternité. And we really wanted to understand how in that system, the idea of affordable housing to all would exist, and existed. And we did understood a lot of things. We were invited by Herzog and Nemeron, who did a master plan for a whole new phase of development of the city in a former industrial site, very big one. And the city asked them to develop the first block as kind of an example of what they wanted to achieve with the whole master plan. And Herzog and Nemeron listed a number of architects, and there was a competition, and we, the developer won, and we were selected to do 3 buildings of the 10 in the block. 2 of them were housing, social housing, really directly built to be inserted in the system of social housing, which is a topic of another lecture in France, and 1 was for free market. We learned a lot of things about the housing system there, and we learned a lot of obviously conflicting ideas, and many that could be replicated, many that of course weren't. But what I definitely learned is that liberté, égalité, and fraternité works for the people probably born in France, very white and very French, because for a Mexican woman architect was very, very, very difficult. I literally cried every single meeting. Because I like to probably, I'm a little bit masochist, then we applied to another competition where we won to build 3 buildings in France, again in Paris, a little bit different context. But in this case, kind of the testament is to understand and to see if it's possible to build these flexible, hyper-flexible buildings. It is on the basis of Paris 2030, and to understand if the flexibility that a standard building with a very regular grid could allow to happen. Also, kind of challenging notions of carbon footprint, which, I mean, if you have read Elisa Iturbe's essay, Architecture and the Death of Carbon Modernity, we all understand that even though these buildings are pretending to be carbon-free, they would never be, because the form of the city is also embedded on that. In the meantime, we were experimenting a lot of things. I mean, I clearly say this to the people that I work with in the private realm, doing many houses, but experimenting on the possibilities of the relationships that those houses can create. I mean, with an extended budget, to have other possibilities of understanding things that could create really investigations and research that have allowed us to take further some ideas. In this house, we really, the family wanted to understand what is a house that doesn't create power relationships to the differentiation of space, to the hierarchy of height of the spaces, of the disposition of the height of the house in a linear or in a multiple story way, and how the family acts. So interestingly enough, the analysis of the power structures of the house and the labor embedded on it, on both things, we were trying to also explore the relationship towards its surroundings and its neighbors, the relationship towards the city. And we also took chances in other houses, for example, in this one, to analyze and understand the possibilities of mobilizing labor. In this case, we built a kitchen. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of it moving, but a kitchen that moves all over the house, and what those relationships mean. At some point, and this house is previous, is one of the first one we did, but looking really profoundly back to these houses, all these things that we were testing were revolving around the same topic and were truly not making a profound critique on many things that we were touching: labor, domestic work, power hierarchies, energy, carbon footprint. All these topics, I think they were only touched very lightly. Or family structures, or things that are embedded in design that really are kind of creating the discriminations that not only architecture really has by being an imposition to a land, but that really architecture promotes and provokes in our society. So yes, architecture is a colonizing act. Architecture is a colonizing act that defines the way we inhabit in this planet. And the way we have been defining what a house should be and is, it has been, to say the least, discriminating the majority. And as I said, I really profoundly never realized that even working for houses that would cost $8,000 or houses that would be able to be built in masses to provide more, but not critically, profoundly doing an analysis on what it means to reproduce this same model of house, which is also been kind of described in the law in Mexico. It's profoundly discriminating people in many regards, no? When we started working for a little town called San Miguel el Alto in Mexico, in el Estado de Mexico, after a very big earthquake in 2017, we had an earthquake that turned down 500 million half a million houses in the whole country. We decided to take a little town and help the possibilities of reconstruction in this town. And but we understood that, first of all, it needed to come a very fast solution into a site and a place and a community that we didn't know at all. So we only came in as kind of technicians, giving advice on how to build structures that will resist an earthquake of those magnitudes, but not in any regard on how to inhabit this community. So we understood a lot of things. The people were designing their houses. We didn't design a thing. And we understood that, first of all, for them, cooking is a collective act. It never can exist in an interior space because all the flavors and the way the cooking is prepared can never exist in a kitchen. Second of all, it's really something that it's building the community. It's an act that it's much more profoundly than the proteins and vitamins that you put into the body. It's really an act of sharing, of creating, of producing stories that holds communities together. We also learned that not everybody cooks in a stove, and that a counter-top kitchen would not serve the majority of the food that is served in my country, at least. And that really, by thinking that those kitchens that are described in the Code of Mexico, the Construction Code of Mexico, and that are sold everywhere in the world, and that we architects just use as a block in AutoCAD to put in plans, really don't serve the majority of the population. So in parallel, we were trying to understand then what is a house and what it really could become, something that is spread out. We searched for different models. In this case, we did a model for a laboratory of housing for the Infonavit, and we created a house that, according to the number of models you will build and because of what you need, obviously the community would become very different and composed on exactly the conditions of each person that builds there, because each person is allowed to compose its models and use these modules for whatever they want. This house was only built, as I said, one iteration for a laboratory, so we don't know how those configurations might have placed in the site. We did many, as I said, experiments on, for example, only allowing to describe construction systems and give tools for people to build their own houses in many regards with the material that we have available. And then we try to understand and unlock what would be really an architecture that allows everybody to inhabit, and especially that it is part of their culture, their locality, their weather, their condition, their ecosystem. There's not, because it's coming from one center, oneself, one form of thinking. So continuing the search, I know architecture is a colonizing act. And architecture is a colonizing act that defines the relationship between our body and the other. I live in a country where also I grew up in a city where also that's very, very evident. Our land was colonized and over-colonized again by very different cultures that are always exposed there. I grew up at a moment where these contradictions and impositions have really shaped the way we are, our society, and that are very, very exposed and present. The ground is colonized in a way that also imposes an active act of thinking, on how the one culture is colonized through architecture over another culture and over another one, and how those things are shaping the way we are. We are in the process of finishing a block in St. Louis, Missouri, which it is kind of an archetypical block of any city in, I would say many of the cities, not any, sorry, many of the cities in the US, which was a residential, well, it used to be farmland, then it was a more industrial, heavy industry land area of the city, then it became residential, and then it was abandoned. It was abandoned in the 40s and 50s, or the houses went down, and then it became just a piece of land, empty piece of block in the middle of this urban sprawl. Little by little, the city of St. Louis has been regaining its population, and we were asked to understand how to rebuild 22 houses in this block. And instead of understanding those houses as single elements that face a street, we wanted to understand them how this first block could create the first steps to build a new form of community, residential community living. So we created a series of steps of creating a house that becomes a private, very private space, and then a semi-private space that it's also still in the realm of the private house, and then a semi-public space that is already in the exterior, and then a more collective space that relates to the street, which is the most collective act of them. So trying to scale the possibilities of relationships by the shifts and why nots of architecture and the tools and the things that we have, devices that architecture provides us. So instead of kind of an outward looking to the street, we created an inward community, ironically to speak outwards to the larger community at the end, at fund. Obviously, there are spaces where are shared by the whole entire block, for example, this pool. But there are also spaces that are shared by the block and the community as this park. There are spaces in the exterior for more intimate relationships among the community, or more intimate relationship with you and just the place. We have tried to understand also how to integrate probably an edible garden. That's on the process, and it will come, but certainly places for interactions of many, in many ways and of many scales. Some of them are larger, some of them are tucked in between the houses. And with that, we have created kind of a set of houses that were designed by 3 other different offices as well. So we designed one, and the other 3 are designed by Productora, and by which is a firm based in Mexico City and New York, by Macías Peredo, a firm based in Guadalajara in Mexico, and a firm in New York called Moss Architects. So our house is very simple, and it just responds to the same logic. We did a rectangle that turns around to give more privacy to the upper space, and the lower space has a much more open possibility to start relating towards the neighborhood. So, or the community of these houses and the exterior as well. For houses, for models of houses are replicated through the whole block with different kind of configurations, different relationships to each other. And this is how the master plan is laid down, and then how the houses have been built and now started to be inhabited. This is for sure not a testament to what a community should be, but trying to understand what possibilities of relationships change by just changing the relationship towards the street, for example, and then what happens on the vertical realm, no? How can we integrate a possibility of spaces that can allow for other possible relationships and can build up a community was a specific task of these developers who came into our office. They thought that their ethos of thinking would align to our way of doing architecture, but when we present them this section, which was a conceptual first sketch, they were truly scared. I'm not sure if they wouldn't understand what we do or that didn't really wanted such a community. But we really arrived to a point where we are very happy to think that they have kind of understood our ethics and that let's see how the building turns out. But the idea of creating spaces of interaction in between neighbors, of not kind of just doing cores and corridors of kind of unknown spaces that bring you to doors and that allow you into your very small units. I think that we created a possibility of those and understanding that it could be equally kind of democratic but equally kind of conflictive enough to have those possibilities. The building is now being built, so we don't know exactly if that will happen, but hopefully that does. We are now endeavoring to go even further to challenge the code. So probably you have seen this, it's nothing new, allowing to understand how to create spaces with flexible structures, so you could kind of open or close your unit towards gaining more square meters or less, towards really creating other possibilities of spaces. Maybe you arrive there as a single person, you don't need a kitchen, but all of a sudden you become 2, and then the necessities grow, and then you become 5, and then the necessities grow even more. So how can a building could also hold a process of life is something that we've been trying to do with this one. As I said, it's nothing new, integrating also other spaces, shared spaces, adaptive reuse, etc. But the challenge here is that the law in Mexico City won't allow something like this in any regard. So it is being really, right now, we've been over 2 years in the process of convincing the authorities and trying to find the ways through the law to understand first shared property, so people could expand or diminish their rooms, how those spaces in between, which are the kitchens and the libraries and the living spaces, can become part of the property of the tenants, but not being transformed into private use. I mean, it's really a challenge because those things that are happening all over the world, the law still in many, many countries, and definitely in ours, doesn't support them. So looking at all those kind of aspects in very practical ways, very pragmatics on how life goes, how life transforms, how life it is, what is the economy, what are the possibilities of the codes, and working on all those challenges in every project we get in. In the meantime, we got a project that has really made us understand something truly interesting about the domestic space. We really work with people as if we only live by habits. We need to shower, we need to eat, we need to sleep, and then we create spaces. We need to work, we need to do all those things. But we never consider that we don't only do those things like that. There's a ritual behind it, and there is a necessity of integrating those inputs as well in our kind of ideas of architecture in order to really hold bodies in this place to exist. 5.5 years ago, I had the first call with Pater Kilian, a Cistercian monk from Heiligenkreuz Abbey in Austria. It has become not only a lifetime project, but a life-changing project. It's because not only I believe the monastery is the ultimate domestic space, I have learned that this is the only typology that is designed to hold bodies to exist in this planet. This project, it is hyper challenging, and of course I'm not presenting here to say that we should all live as monks or that we should transform our housing domestic environment to cells or monasteries, but really has been allowing me to understand many of basic premises that we don't take in consideration in our built environment in many regards. This is a monastery built in 1133. There are today 102 monks. It's an incredibly thriving community, which you cannot believe that exists today, and that lives in a very traditional Cistercian monastery that really follows the rule in full. A monastery, it's a Cistercian monastery is a very specific architecture building that has been described even in the rule that follows, that gives the possibilities of them existing in this building. No, it follows precepts that are marking how this building needs to be exactly designed to hold the ritual of the day and of the life. It really responds to the way the day that of the monk exists, the way they live, how the body needs to sleep and eat in certain moments, and how all this orchestrated is through the help or to architecture or the other way around. We never know what's going to be what was first. The monks live in a life that it's ora y labora, pray and work. They pray with with Gregorian chants 5 times a day for more or less in sum is 5 hours. And obviously the ritual depends on how the voice bounces in the space and the other way around. So it's not only about how you transition through the space, it's how you also use the space and what the space does to how you use it. And with this, we had to imagine a new monastery in Brandenburg. And for that, I decided to invite Dogma, Pier Vittorio Aureli, who I met here, and Martino Tatara and Mayo Studio. And we've been working for now 3.5 years together to understand how to create a new monastery for the 21st century in a tradition that is almost 10 centuries long. we have really kind of gone to the understanding of what holds this ritual together. And it's a precept that is being thought 16 centuries ago. So our challenge is to think what is the monastery of the 21st century and how does that ritual really can hold as of today. For me, and for the purpose of this lecture, is less important what the monastery shape or the design decisions that we made, but much more the two most important lessons that I learned. So first of all is that the understanding of the monk as an individual that needs to live this very intimate ritual, which is a spiritual ritual that they're committed to, but that they need absolutely a community to be able to do it, is, and that the architecture understands that profoundly, is kind of the most important lessons. It's really the building that shows that we need the other to exist. So the monks, the original monks, how the orders were founded. I mean, it's also a topic of another lecture. But they were hermits in the desert, and all of a sudden, little by little, they started to understand that they needed a community to be hermits on deserts. And this is when the monastic orders were founded, started to appear, and then the monastery as an architectural feature started to emerge. I mean, as I said, it's a topic of another lecture. We've been studying for 5 years. But I think that the understanding of how the monastery is laid down to create those and coordinate and really rhythmically, profoundly compose the possibilities of an individual to be private and then to be communal, to exist, is really something that I have really profoundly learned and that I hope I can carry out in many regards. It understands the necessity of this retreatment and the necessity of the exposure to the community, but the necessity of doing it in scales. And the second thing that I profoundly understood is exactly what I said in the beginning, that we don't only live by habits, that yes, again, I said it before, we not only eat because to get proteins and vitamins in our bodies, we eat and the act of eating in a ritualistic way is what really nurtures our bodies, and that with all the other activities in life. Architecture, yes, it is a colonizing act, that it defines our relationship to the ground. And again, here I go back to the ground to tell you that I was born and grown in a city that not only was colonized by its architecture, and its architecture colonized every culture that has existed in this land. It colonized a piece of land, natural land, that had a lake. It colonized in full the lake. So the lake that no longer is visible, it's obviously there in our ground, and our ground is super muddy. This has really shaped the way I understand ground in many regards. It's not only that the cities on top of that colonize a lake and the city sitting on top of the lake. We are also very close to the failure of San Andrés, which is a very big failure that passes through America. America, the continent, is not only a country. America is a continent. And that makes our city be seated in a very seismic area. So for me, the ground means a lot of things. And the colonizing of a ground also means a lot of things. We were asked to create different structures to follow a pilgrimage route in Mexico City that has happened for many centuries, and that really brings people walking in a ritualistic way towards a virgin, that is a Virgin of Rosary in a little town called Talpa de Allende. And what really it is about the journey. It's about why you're making this journey towards the Virgin, which it's 150 kilometers long, more or less. And it is kind of 120 miles. I don't know. The world is in kilometers. So, and I think that for us, what was important is to understand how that procession could be accompanied by structures that would really provide positions and indications for the continuation of their narrative in this walk. So we also made a master plan and invited very different people to intervene on it, because there were many sites that needed a kind of an intervention, and we thought it was much more interesting to do it in a collective group. So we did the first kind of intervention of where people mostly are drawn from many different parts of Mexico, even from the state mainly, but also from Mexico. They arrive to this point and they start their journey of 5 days, more or less, of walking towards this burden. And we did this open chapel that is very recognizable from many different places as a starting point. We invited Kristen Gantenbein, which is an office from Basel, to do the next point of interest, but also of encounter. It was naturally already their point of interest and encounter. We tried to link those to the existing ritual as well. We did an open chapel that would kind of be on the pass. And we invited others like Ai Weiwei and Alejandro Aravena, who did this structure in the middle of the landscape, Derek Delecamp, Rosana Montiel. I mean, there were many people intervening this notion, but that a project that allowed us to understand the procession of time and the creation of architectures that allow possibilities of different narratives, or of narratives in many ways and many regards. And the first real contact with those ideas came when we filmed the whole process after these buildings were built. And we found out that the majority of the people would just say, well, we don't know, but at least people or the government or whoever did this, people wouldn't understand who did it, finally saw us, understood that this is a very long tradition for us, and that we have those buildings that represent that someone is caring and understanding what we do in this land. So architecture also provides a possibility, of course, of representation in many regards, an imposition and a representation. And how can we carry on with it as architects, I think, is a big responsibility. We have been working for 18 years in a botanical garden in this town of Culiacan, which is a west city of the north kind of part of the country. Sorry, I don't have a map, but Culiacan is the capital of the state of Sinaloa. And there is an existing botanical garden that for 25 years had existed when we arrived. Now it's 18 years more because we arrived 18 years ago. And the idea was to kind of insert a very intensive art collection that would enhance the visit in many regards with many things. So our challenge was to understand how to keep a garden that is mainly a botanical garden, and that everything else that needed to come in just needed to enhance the visit. Already was a very important place for the community. It was a very regarded space, urbanly and socially speaking, for the city. So we had really a difficult task, and what we did is through these years, have been doing very different and little interventions with small programs that are really kind of creating a possibility of new relationships with art, of new relationships with different programs that they started with in workshops and libraries and lectures, and with the community in general. The garden has been seen an increase of visits of crazy numbers. So the incredible thing is that when we add a new structure, we can have a new input on what has that structure created on the landscape. In terms architecturally, what we thought is how can we create an architecture that relates to this garden, that makes an imposition in this landscape, that clears a part of the garden with a beautiful collection to give a possibility of these other spaces to give other opportunities, but how this architecture then gives back or relates to it, how it dialogues, how it creates a conversation was an important point for us. We again, a subject of another lecture is why we chose this materiality. But the one big idea was to think on what was a material that allows us to be everything, to be a protective shell that really protects from the external weather, which is brutal, to be a material that is able to hold the full structure, to be the aesthetic final definition, to be the insulation definition, to be everything definition in one thing. We then proposed concrete, this was still 18 years ago, but of course, when we arrived, everybody everywhere was like, concrete in a botanical garden, what are you thinking? We need to build in wood. I said, wood from where? I mean, like we bring it from the wood forests in the United States or in Chile, because that's our options. Then wood in a place where there's 3 months of 45 degrees centigrade, which is very high. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's very, very, very hot. And the coldest it gets is 20 degrees centigrade. How are we going to control the temperature inside? Air conditioning? No, well, but we have bamboo here. Maybe why wouldn't we do it in bamboo? Yeah, again, air conditioning running for 3 months in full speed, because otherwise how can we control, with layers of bamboo, we cannot control the temperature as much as we control it with concrete. At the end, I really proved these. I obviously got the help of technicians, etc. And today we have proven that we have saved much more energy than much more carbon footprint than the carbon footprint we did and produced by doing these buildings in concrete. So by analyzing its own context, we need to understand what are the possibilities for those architectures and what are the necessities of those architectures. Architecture, it is a colonizing act, and its representation defines its intentions in many ways. So we have been challenging not only the way we do architecture, but the form we represented it. Because a plan, a section, a facade, an elevation, a render is not an innocent image, is not a neutral image, can never be, and it is not a neutral form of producing thought, but never, ever, I think, producing architecture. So we've been challenging the way we not only the way we do buildings. In this case, what we do, this was a house. It is still, people say that they're going to build it, I don't know. That what we did is we don't know who is going to inhabit it, so we produce modules that are nothing, have no program, and they're just spread in the landscape, and they could be inhabited as whatever. And then we presented to the municipality this idea. They liked it, they approved it, and they said, but we need plans to submit the permits. We didn't want it to make plans because we didn't want it to tell how space should be used. We didn't want it to put a kitchen in a specific space, a bedroom, or etc. And what we did is we started challenging the notion of plans. How could represent a space that can be used in multiple ways? This image is a little bit fuzzy. You cannot see everything, but it is a drawing that is in a sketch paper, and it's being able to be folded to represent different things. So it can become little models, plans, sections, facades in one same drawing. We got it approved, and then they said, well, but we need images. So we thought the same. When we do an image, then we will make an imposition of how these spaces could be used. But then we said, okay, how to escape that? We need it fast. And what we did is we asked Gonzalo, a person in the office, how would you live in this house? So this is Gonzalo's house. It's not the house we designed. It's his house. He decided how to do it. We tried to challenge even that. We were saying, okay, if we are opening paths towards the space to be used in many regards, how can we integrate those conditions to design? So we were invited for a project that one I thought it was much more utopic than the first one I showed you. The other one I thought it was going to be built pretty soon. In Germany, they invited 20 or so offices, and it was called New Ways of Life. And the brief asked for a house that would respond to these new forms of living, which was working and living in the same space. This is pre-pandemic. I thought, well, working and living, we have been working and living forever in the same space. Don't we work in the house? I mean, I always thought of the house as a most important place of work because it's where we do care labor. But also, we have been working productively from our homes since the start of humanity, but also till the day in the majority of the places on Earth, but on the urban areas, which is where these two things are more differentiated. So I thought, well, this is not a new way of living, this is ways of living. So how can we create a house that is for anyone to create their own way of life? So we charged, we said, okay, how then we start doing spaces? And we charged activities, we thought maybe emotions could be input, then we started describing each of the space, and then we said, now what? Okay, what are those, each of those spaces that we described in words? Let's put them in images, and this is where the first problem started. But it was also the first time where we used collage, not only as a tool of representation, but as a tool of design. So we collage all those 6 spaces. I'm not going to tell you how hard it was, because obviously we couldn't agree on an image that would describe what we were thinking on one word. It was much easier to put words than images together. But at the end, we had them all, and we collaged each of the spaces that this house should have. And then we said, okay, now what? We have 6 collages. How do we design a house from there? And we put them all together. We traced them. We finally started shaping a house. We ended up obviously being 3 days from the deadline, so we needed to deliver the house. We finished the design, and we delivered this model. And I thought, well, we could have arrived to the same shape of house with the same idea by just starting saying, okay, there's a kitchen, 2 bathrooms, 2 bedrooms, and a working space, and what is the shape? And I was a little bit disappointed. Nevertheless, we presented it. We presented this way. We said it can be used whatever. It doesn't have a kitchen and a bedroom and a bathroom. It just has spaces, and they have different relationship to the ground, different types of light, different shapes. And that's what we want. And a year later, I get a call from a guy saying, we want to build the house because the house represents perfectly who we are, and it really allows us to use it the way we are. I'm like, oh yeah, how? And then I endeavored in the call, and I really understood it did. Because they interpreted the spaces the way they wanted. And the most interesting thing is that they interpreted completely opposite to what I thought. The place where I would put the kitchen, they would put the main space of kind of more public and more open, what I would think of that, and it's in a more tucked-in space, but whatever. I mean, I think that now it's starting construction, which I'm very excited, in Germany. And let's see, but already the interaction that we have had really allows to think that there are possibilities of us questioning how can we do an architecture that becomes a platform for anyone else to inhabit. Last year, we were named kind of the Miller Prize recipients, which then that entitles you to do a pavilion in the Miller Library in Columbus, Indiana. And then in this festival that happens every 2 years, Exhibit Columbus. And they asked us, the curators of this year really wanted to have spaces that were designed with the community, and they called it design by the public. So public by design, sorry. So we started going there in several times, and we thought, well, this idea of participation has always been for us super tricky. How do you really create a thing that is designed by the public? If you only sit there 3 times, get a community that's hyper diverse, that has different ideas, and what do you do with it? So, but we started nevertheless with trying to understand if the regular tools of participation would allow us and would tell us anything at all. And of course it didn't. It told us exactly what we thought, that some kids wanted dinosaurs to be flying on the plaza, and some others wanted a skating park, and some others really wanted a library out there, and some others wanted a barbecue area. And we said, okay, now we moved the voices in the community, and now we're going to design a pavilion with that. We're not going to bring dragons. We're not going to have a zoo. We're not going to have a skate park. How can we do something that really is being able to represent the community, and especially designed by the community, how the curators asked. So after all this process, we decided, okay, instead of trying to put member of the community to say and to agree on one thing, why don't we give tools for anyone to create their own plaza in this space? So we designed 3 pieces of furniture, and a little bit drawn by the idea that this is on the exterior of the library. We created a kind of library of objects that would allow people to use the space in multiple ways, not in any regard. We thought we wanted infinite possibilities, but of course they were not infinite. And so we created a library of objects, and we really think that this space then is, it's very, very designed by the public. So these blue things are pieces of furniture that then hold things, that then allow many different possibilities of usage, and of course of objects to be taken by the members of the community and then bring them back. And then we got calls from the organization for people to bring objects and to leave them in the library. And yeah, the color is not planned. Sorry, I just realized. Trying to explore if these possibilities are giving really tools for participation. We did a much more intense process of talking to communities to design things in Hunters Point in San Francisco, where we even developed different tools to design. I'm gonna skip these because I want to reach to the other projects. But what I wanna tell you with this, is that in this case, it really profoundly needed, it's a very long story. It's a site that belonged to a power plant that was polluting the whole neighborhood, and that was really preventing people to be able, first of all, to get in touch with the seafront, because this is in the seafront, and it really banned the whole neighborhood around to access that in terms of view, but also in physical terms. And it really had exploited the whole environment by polluting it and by many other things. So nothing that we could do in architecture could, let's say, do things better. It could only make things worse, because, of course, in San Francisco, when you wipe out a power plant and you create anything, real estate just goes in, pulls it out, and brings luxury development towards this place. So then the whole neighborhood that fought for the power plant to be removed would not have been benefit, not even that, it would be completely expelled from the neighborhood. So it was very tricky. We worked with land use attorneys, finally, to understand how to create a process of ownership of the land that would enhance the possibility of the neighborhood and that would not expel them at the end. The first task was to move the substation that was able to be remaining there because after the lawsuit of the shutting of the power plant. So we created a design for a building that it was meant to be for machines, but for us meant to be the first building that could be kind of the act of representation of the community, and how this new space of open public space would relate towards the community and towards the sea. In this way, we tried to work again, and in parallel, we were working for a building in a university building in UDEM that really, for us, the idea of working with a gated community, which is this university in Monterrey, UDEM, and how this community could expand to the city, no? A little bit the other way around. We did it in the Hunters Point project. In this case, we wanted to open those paths of the university towards the exterior. And we use it with many, many devices. First of all, the architectural idea of expanding kind of the building towards the street, giving a street front, but also towards its interior and giving a possibility of those structures to exist. I think that the building is also a transformable building. That's what the client wanted. This is, half of it is parking, and half of it is these spaces that you see in these photographs. And the challenge was how to think after, in a future of 20 years, hopefully 20, where there will be no cars in the campus, how these spaces could transform again back into spaces for the community, the university, the students and the community there. So I think that architecture is a colonizing act, and it defines our relationship to our own ecosystem. And how we position ourselves within the ecosystem depends on many inputs. How we create those relationships between ourselves, the other, and the other organism, living organisms, is also something that we have been studying in full. In this case, also, I'm going to try to run to get to the final project. It's just after this one, I'm very sorry. In this case, we did a building that was supposed to be a theater. We thought that Oaxaca is in the center of Oaxaca City on the southwest part of Mexico. Oaxaca is a city with a very rich cultural tradition. And we thought that really a theater, an enclosed theater without a possibility of a relationship to its exterior and the surroundings would be a very kind of restrictive space, especially that it already existed in the city. So how to create a plaza that draws in the community and that draws out the activity of the theater was our challenge. It was a competition that we won with Mauricio Rocha, and that we then finished building this building a year ago, but unfortunately has only been used once as a theater. But our proposal was to, and it's a long story, it's not yet finished, it's going to be soon, so etc. But our idea was to understand, know how to create an architecture that at the same time becomes a very enclosed kind of serious theater with all its theatric elements that provide a real incredible acoustics, etc. Possibility of that program, but also a public space that draws of the society, that is also drawing on the fact that the weather here is super generous. It's very mild the whole year. So how can we open this building towards its own environment and create a possibility of an architecture that becomes a medium with the exterior in every regard than rather an imposition towards it, no? Architecture is a colonizing act, and it is really has a very important thing that has a static definition. It's a very static thing, and with that staticity, it holds an ever-changing process, which is life. And I have always thought how time and how life really is not only passing through architecture, sometimes in very short periods of time, and architecture just remains there. What is going to remain from what we are doing today in the future, and how is it going to remain? And how are we thinking not only in our own terms, but in the process of life in full? The monks have given me the possibility of also thinking that this monastery for them, it's a building, first of all, that should last for an eternity, and the architecture times have been just defined as providing the possibility of thinking of a building that will last for many centuries to come. Not only that, the monks think of time in a very different way. They're only here for a short period of time and for a process of a lifetime. And that also has allowed me to understand what is a building, what are the responsibilities of doing a building of today. We were asked, after doing the botanical garden for 8 years, for redesigning a central park in Mazatlan, which had a very kind of definitive condition of a natural regulating lagoon. For years and years and years, the city grew, of course, and this was not able to grow onto this part of the land of the town because it had this natural regulating lagoon that fluctuated. Then years after, the municipality really described it as a park, and for years they tried to create interventions to use it, but they never really in full achieved an intervention that was able to think how to kind of mediate between this lagoon that fluctuates and that floods and that shrinks, and the people who can use it. So we did this plan, and we started understanding structures that would be sometimes flooded, sometimes not flooded, sometimes dry, and other places were always dry, other places were always wet. And we needed to clean the lagoon to give birth to this park, first and foremost. And we knew that two very important structures were coming along, an aquarium and a museum. We were not designing those. They had architects. They already were in place. They were first than us arriving there, so we just needed to follow the rules and allow those structures to be in the park, but with no any information from our side or input that could change their decisions. So we just concentrated on the park and understood what were the relationships of those buildings to the park. And then one day, after we were cleaning already the lagoon, we were working on the site to start consolidating this park. We were asked by the same people if we could do the aquarium, because the design they had didn't look like an aquarium. And I said, oh, well, we have a lot of problems because, first of all, we think of the aquarium as a structure that it's really kind of what this mural of Diego Rivera represents, is the man controller of the universe. Yeah, the man controller of the universe, man. And it's a guy that actually the title of the mural is that. And for me, the aquarium is exactly that. No, it's a structure that really the representation of the man, that we cannot enter this world, so why bring it to us? No, let's bring to us this life that we cannot enter, and let's fantasize about it. And the second problem I had with the aquarium that they were creating is that they were thinking of this specifically spot for entertaining people, bringing penguins to Mazatlan, which is 40 degrees centigrade year round, and exhibiting to anyone who could come there. So I said, you have the most beautiful and important aquarium of the world, which is the Sea of Cortez in front, and you want to create back there what, an amusement park? Not me. And then they said, well, that's exactly the problem. That's why we think this is not an aquarium and that it doesn't look like an aquarium. So then I said, okay, we're talking business now. So I said, well, okay, now how we're going to do to create an aquarium that, first of all, not only looks like an aquarium, that really represents the space that we are trying to look at, which is the life in the sea. First of all, we thought we needed obviously a very large team of people who were experts on this topic. When we understood that they really wanted to create a place for research and the protection of life of the Sea of Cortez, specifically, we invited the people from OceanWise, which are an organization that have the Vancouver Aquarium and that have done this very, very extensively, and that have created an organization that protects a lot the environment. And with them, we designed the whole kind of idea of this space. So then what is a building that holds that and that could hold that? We couldn't imagine, and we had never seen an example of something like that. So we were lucky enough that we got into a building that was built in 2023. And then in 2100, the sea rose and the building was flooded. And then the sea receded because I think it's cyclical. And then life took over this building, and we were able to arrive to the place at the moment where life really took over the building, to open paths for us humans in this year 2289 to discover what had happened, what had life taken over this building, and what is a building that just becomes a platform for anything to flourish there, whatever it comes. So we created a structure that it is really a building that doesn't have a purpose, it doesn't have a program. It's just a structure that promotes life in many regards to exist on it. As I said, we created these very big stairs that bring you to the top of the building, where a very big part of the fauna, the flora invaded it, and then brings you in to this interior building where you're able to converge in many regards with different types of life and different types of ecosystems within its walls. So the building started to be built in 2020. Finally, May 2023 was finally built. Right now it's in the process of being invaded by life. And I hope I am able to see it in 2289. I wait for you there. I hope you too. And understand how really life took over, hopefully much more than what is there today. This piece of architecture has allowed me to understand also not only to draw on the responsibility of time in architecture, of place, but also the relationship of humans and our own environment, which is absolutely necessary to close the gap, because otherwise our own environment is expelling us from it. Yes, architecture is a colonizing act, and we need to understand how we can use it to provide platforms for anyone to create their own way of inhabiting this planet, and consonance with its constituents and with own ecosystem. By the way, I also think it's a collective act, and I do it collectively, and I do it also even with you here. Thank you so much.
We have time for only a few questions, I'm afraid, but since Tatiana is here all semester, and next spring, and spring after that, we will have time to ask her questions, but let's do one or two. Any hands?
Hi, Tatiana. Thank you for your amazing lecture. I want you to understand what is the difference between this ruin that you've just showed, that you designed, and a suspended garden. I mean, what are the techniques to make life flourish in the buildings that you applied in this design?
I mean, what we've done is several acts. First act was to simplifying the devices because life flourishes everywhere. I mean, you can see that life even takes roots. Plants would also grow if you just leave the ground here very, very fast, even here with the dark and enclosed space. So we just wanted to simplify the processes instead of kind of technifying them. So as you were able to see or not, the building is super open. It really, if it rains inside. If it's sunny, it's sunny. And yeah, sorry if you get wet, but if maybe there's a bird that comes in and just makes its nest there. And we want that. So how to promote it, first of all, to allow the architecture just become a medium and not a limit between what happens inside or outside. This is not inside or outside, it's the building and not in the building. And but also, of course, for more complex types of life, which is the sea life that needs an environment, we created kind of these very big tanks where life can exist. But I have to say that those are spaces also for research, for association of the people with its own context of the Sea of Cortez, and that really have all those were really technically designed and specifically kind of technically designed to hold life. The building also has devices of keeping the humidity and making, when it rains, it really, everything flows. And when it doesn't rain, it has the possibility of keeping also the life together by using the water that has collected over time or that is around. That's basically, in very simple words, a very complex system that we designed over years and years on place. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions? I think we were wowed and overwhelmed. Thank you.
Thank you.